Hi, I'm Terry Kolath. I'm here with Professor Adrian Kerr. We're talking about his second offering in the Summer Academy. This time it's a two-session look at Cambodia, its history and culture. Adrian, thanks for coming back for Cambodia.
Thank you, Terry. It's a privilege to be here.
Cambodia, its history and culture, you say, begins in the Stone Age?
Well, Cambodia is a very interesting country today. It's extremely poor. Not so long ago, there were only 13 physicians in the whole country. It has one of the lowest incomes in Southeast Asia, vying with Burma as being the poorest country. It has very little today in terms of wealth, no natural wealth. So it's a really sad story in that it's under a one-party state, and the current situation is very distressing. However, if we look back in time, we find a very different picture. Cambodia grew up around the 800s to being the greatest empire in the Southeast Asia, bar one. And it spread from Burma into Thailand and into Vietnam. And the Khmer Empire produced some of the most marvelous religious buildings which have survived all the way through to present times. And one of the biggest tourist attractions today, about 1.5 million tourists will go all the way across the other side of the world to visit Siem Reap, which is the center, modern center of the Khmer Empire. And there are great buildings like Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom, the Bayon, Ta Prohm, which captivate the West and have been the center of very many movies, of which the most famous, of course, is Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. She actually filmed for 35 seconds in the Siem Reap area. But it's becoming a very big tourist attraction because it's so special, it's unique, and it's so large. It is the largest collection of religious buildings in the world today. And it's their main source of foreign exchange, of course. And rather sadly, I think, is that they are going to build an intercontinental airport in Siem Reap so that people can fly from Europe directly, non-stop, into Siem Reap. And you can imagine what that's going to do to the tourist trade.
Oh my gosh, so they need the tourists, but it's going to totally change the character, probably.
It's already becoming a major challenge for them to control all these millions of tourists which are wandering around these great temples. And of course, there are good things and bad things about tourism. It brings money, but the bad things are it becomes notorious.
So all of this is happening in those old and valuable temples.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sad. Khmer, tell us about Khmer Rouge.
Yes, the second part brings us up to date. The period after the Khmer Empire collapsed, which is probably an ecological collapse, just overpopulation, led to the takeover by the French eventually, part of the French Southeast Asia Empire, which included Laos and Vietnam, of course. But the French saw Cambodia as an opportunity to gain land, but when they realized how poor the country was, they pretty much just left it alone and taxed it. So Cambodia was on the back burner for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then the desperate period, which is notorious and sad for all mankind, took place, which we call the Killing Fields, or the Pol Pot regime, which has only lasted for 3.5 years. But in the 70s, Cambodia was wide open to the takeover by a guy called Pol Pot, who was a Marxist anarchist, and he saw an opportunity to take over this poor, divided country, and he managed to take advantage of the awful conditions and the very bad harvest for 3 years to gain power and take over the country militarily. So for 3.5 years he ran the country, and his idea of absolute power was he had nobody to challenge him. And so the university professors and the school teachers were all kicked out of their jobs and given a spade and some seeds and told to grow some crops. And of course, many of them died. Something like 20% of the population of the country died in that period. He also was concerned that the villages might rise up against him, so he ringed all the villages and towns with minefields, which are still there today, and to stop these people mixing with each other and rising up against him. And that was the other dreadful legacy that he left us, and the number of people who have lost limbs and still are losing limbs by these minefields, which are not well known. He made a terrible blunder in that he took on Vietnam, which at the time was militarily very strong after the American War, and Vietnam occupied Cambodia for a number of years until the United Nations took over and put it back under an even keel again. And it's sort of limped along since then. It's unfortunately rather an ecologically negative environment, and that they're burning the woods and the forests to clear land for growing crops, and most of the woods now have gone, and it's terribly overpopulated in the cities. And Phnom Penh, for instance, is a tragedy, which we'll talk about in the second part of the talk.
It's a sad story.
It's a sad story, but the people themselves, of course, are miracles. And I'm going to tell you a very, very interesting story about a young lady who's 12 years of age, came out of school and made contact with me when I was there last. And she just was so amazing in her knowledge of the world that you can't help but believe that one day the people of Cambodia will improve the quality of their life and move into our standard of living, hopefully.
That's wonderful. All right. Thank you very much. I hope you'll join us Tuesday, May 9th and the following week for Session 2 on Cambodia.